Welcome everyone to World Usability Day 2013. My name is Kathy Goulet, Vice President of the Connecticut User Experience Professionals Association, better known as CTUXPA. And tonight we have a panel discussion on our theme, which is collaborating for better systems through healthcare. And we're glad to have you all here. And if you're new to our group tonight and have not signed up officially, you can talk to any one of the officers, so Richard and Steve and AJ in the back there. And there's a sheet for those that did not sign up through Eventbrite, and feel free to just add your name to the list and you'll get on the email distribution for future events. And then special thank you to our sponsors, Mad Pow, Tech Solutions, for providing food back there. And we've got raffles tonight provided by Timex and Morgan Kaufman. They're all in the back, so put your business cards in for all the prizes that we'll do at the end of the session. And the bowl's right there. And if you don't have a business card, there's blank cards you can fill your name on.
Thank you.
And just upcoming with our chapter, we have a winter social in December, and it'll be at Piatti's in Glastonbury, and it should be available in an announcement by tomorrow, I believe. And there's information on membership coming up, and incentive to get the membership in by the 11th of December, and to take advantage of an earlier membership as opposed to starting later January. And in addition to that, we have a full-day usability workshop coming up that we're in the process of planning. And there's 2 tracks for that, for management and practitioners. And stay tuned for that, and you should see that in emails as well coming up. And registration will open December 2nd. And we're working on a location, and just keep an eye on the announcements, and that will be announced soon. So tonight, based on the World Usability Day topic that's given out worldwide, we chose a theme. And our theme this year is consumer health trends and trying to shape behavior one step at a time. And how we're doing that, we've got Obamacare, we've got all these new ways of trying to track your health on apps and watches and different devices like Fitbit. And so tonight we have a panel of experts on all these areas, and they're going to be led by our moderator, Amy Cueva, who's our Chief Experience Officer at Mad Pow and founder. And she's going to lead the questions for the panelists, which include Kerin Smollen with Aetna and WellMatch, Dan Shilov on the end, Cigna. We have Shiri Dori-Hacohen from University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and Steve Glynn from Timex. So after this, we will have the raffle, and we will also have an event following this at the main pub in Manchester, and everyone is welcome to attend. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Amy. And we also have a video for one of our presenters that are on the panel. So whenever that comes, just let me know and I'll play it.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Happy World Usability Day. Or should I say World User Experienceability Day? No. So I'm just curious, how many of you are coming from health companies, organizations? Raise them high. Oh my gosh, there's like curious non-health people here. Welcome. We will confuse you and amaze you and inspire you, hopefully. Mission. So I'm Amy. As Kathy mentioned, one of the founders at Mad Pow, Chief Experience Officer. I oversee our health practice, and one of the big things going on in our health practice is around behavior change, which is so interesting to us. It's really, some big things are happening right now. It's where the rubber hits the road in terms of how we can leverage psychology, design, and technology to help humans get motivated and change their behaviors. And so it's so exciting. So many new things are happening, and it's actually starting to become proven that this stuff can work. So it's like, oh my God. So lots of good stuff is happening. So I'm really excited to be here with our lovely panelists to be discussing the topic of World Usability Day this year, which is health. So without further ado, I'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves. You have a video. You guys will let me know if there's bunny ears, right? 'Cause I'm not paranoid. So introduce yourselves and let us know, why are you passionate about the overlap of healthcare, design, usability, technology? So really, what drives your passion? How are you able to put up with the nonsense that goes on in the health industry, basically, is what we want to know.
Hi everyone, my name is Kerin Smollen. I am so honored really to be asked to speak on this panel, especially for healthcare and user experience design. So I've actually only been in healthcare, it's actually a year exactly today that I started at WellMatch. And so, to be able to sit here as like an expert is kind of interesting. So I'm a senior product manager at WellMatch. WellMatch is, I'm going to play a video so you explain it a little better, but it's a healthcare transparency application. We are funded by Aetna, and we are really designed to save people money when they're shopping for healthcare. So I think we should probably play the video now, so I'll make it a little easier.
This is Tina, and this is Helen. Tina likes to ride her bike. Helen likes to run. But undiagnosed injuries are taking them away from the active lives they like to lead. Fed up with missing another day of biking and running, Tina and Helen decide to do something about it. Both of them want to get care, but have high deductible insurance plans and are concerned about what it might cost. Tina goes online to a search engine. Helen turns to WellMatch. Tina begins creating her own list of doctors to call. With WellMatch, Helen has the tools she needs to make a smart choice. On WellMatch, Helen can compare costs, read reviews from patients, and see recommendations from the people she knows at work. Helen can also take advantage of any discounts providers are offering and see how close she is to meeting her deductible. Later at the doctor's office, Helen can use WellMatch to make decisions about her appointment and book it right away. But for Tina, who also wants to be sensible about money, the search to find a doctor continues. A friend gets back to her with some recommendations. She leaves a few messages with some doctor's offices.
Your call is important to us.
It's almost impossible to get the information on her own. Ultimately, Tina decides to put off making an appointment for another week. Meanwhile, Helen is already off to a speedy recovery. And with the money she saved by using WellMatch, she buys herself a new pair of running shoes. On WellMatch, you can find care at a great price and get back to doing the things you love to do. WellMatch, a new, better way to help your employees get smarter about what matters most: their health.
That kind of sums it up. So why I decided to join WellMatch is, there's so much tremendous change happening in the industry right now in healthcare. And I realized that this was probably one of those rare opportunities where somebody who comes from a user experience background like myself actually had the ability to affect change. So I was really excited to join it. And since, we've rolled out WellMatch, when I started at WellMatch, what's now WellMatch, it was Clinical Capacity Exchange when I started. I actually got the opportunity to name the company and go through all the rigmarole that goes along with a startup. We had one beta customer, and today we have 15. So another thing to kind of look at, we started with what would be 36 covered lives. By 2014, we will have over 1 million. So just having that design-driven process has really had a lot of results, and that's been a really satisfying thing to see. It's been a satisfying thing to be a part of, and so I'm humbled to be part of it.
Hi everybody, my name is Shiri Dori-Hacohen, and I'm a PhD student at UMass Amherst. My current research is actually about information retrieval. We're working on this cool project I was just telling some of the other panelists, where we're trying to automatically detect controversial topics on the web. So if you're interested in that, I'll be happy to talk about that separately. And that's including but not limited to health-related issues. So you can imagine do vaccines cause autism controversy, homeopathy, even an amazing cancer treatment called Issel's treatment, which will tell you to stop chemotherapy and go on herbs instead, which has been, if you look a few research results down, you'll see that it's actually been issued a warning by the NIH and outlawed in Britain, but if you're not a savvy consumer, you might miss out on that. So we're trying to automatically detect those topics and inform the users. And in my previous lifetime, before I came to UMass, I was actually at University of California, San Diego, where I was working in a ubiquitous computing group, which is a fancy name to say kind of this, but also this and that and that and that. So all these cool devices that are becoming more and more part of our lives. And I was working in part on a project on air pollution detection and public health issues that stem from that. So very, very interesting things that I think you mentioned. The intersection of technology and health is where things really get exciting because there's so much going on in the tech space. So again, I'm from a computer science background, but very interested in if I had to define my mission sort of more broadly, it would be connecting humans and computers, because right now we're speaking two different languages, and that's not a good idea. So on a more personal note, I think we're all, in a sense, consumers. In a sense, healthcare is unique because there's nobody in this room who is never going to be a consumer of healthcare or a patient, hopefully, in situations where we were happy about it, but not necessarily. And so on a personal note, I also had a chronic disease for most of my life. So I unfortunately knew all too well the struggles that patients go through. And thankfully for me, I'm actually healthy right now. So I'm one of those lucky few who can say I used to be a sick person who was sometimes healthy, and now I'm a healthy person who is occasionally sick. But I think that gives me a different sort of perspective on the kind of issues that people have when they're actually in the system as the customers, as the clients, as the patients, really. And patience is actually sometimes a challenging thing to do when you're a patient. So without further ado.
Thank you. I'm Steve Glynn. I am the user experience engineer at Timex. I am a team of one. You're probably wondering, what is a guy from Timex doing on a panel about health? But what we're doing as a company, or what we've done in the past, at least, has been very athlete-focused. So you're probably familiar with all the things we have floating around with the Ironman brand on them, focused at athletes. But as Shiri was talking about, there's obviously a new push towards different kinds of monitoring and technology, and the whole wearable trend. And I think one of the reasons our company's gotten involved is because we occupy a very valuable spot on people's body, and that's their wrist. And it's kind of a habit. You put things on your wrists. Most people of a certain age, people beyond a certain age, people wear quite a few things on their wrist, depending on who they are. And so, the company has recognized, oh, hey, there's kind of an opportunity here. And so I've been with the company about a year now. And I think, what drives my passion, I think, is two things. On a purely selfish level, the geek in me just loves the technology. And then also, I love what I call kind of the puzzle-solving aspect, and or really the data visualization or the data presentation. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the work of Edward Tufte, and taking these mounds of data and presenting them to people in a way that they can actually take it and do something with it. So I think those are really my interest areas in the field.
Hi, I'm Dan. So I work currently at ChoiceLinks, which is a subsidiary at Cigna, and we do a lot of benefits enrollment. So basically, that's kind of your first step as you're signing up for insurance. You're selecting your medical plans, your dental plans, life, voluntary, all that fun stuff. Prior to this, I actually worked at Cigna, various departments at Cigna. So kind of to Amy's point, really kind of get a broad sense from technology, the kind of sites that we build, from the design, how do we design them, and also from research. So I think a lot of that kind of comes back to my passion. Totally agree with Steve about just being a tech geek in some sense. I've been, had like my Nike Plus for maybe almost a decade, maybe a little bit less than that, but pretty much since it came out, and just kind of love that technology. Obviously design, it's a huge passion of mine. That's currently what I do at ChoiceLinks as a user experience designer. Really kind of the health, probably when people think about health, they don't really think about health insurance, but a lot of the stuff that we do is aimed towards health and wellness and incentivizing people and really kind of being there with them, not against them, and helping them out to be healthy or to maintain their health. And kind of, again, to Amy's point, try to remove the nonsense from the jargon and all that bad stuff and make the experience a little bit easier.
You can try throwing it. I don't know how that works.
Just change the slide. Okay. If anyone wishes to tweet tonight, it's at
Wonderful.
Fancy.
Get your tweet on. So, talking about passions, one of the things that really drives me and our organization is the belief that design can make the world a better place, and the health arena is ripe with opportunities to do just that. The industry right now is ripe for disruption. So many innovations are happening, and everything's getting shaken up. And insurance companies get a bad rap, but they're the ones where financial incentives are actually aligned with health. People are cheaper the healthier they are, and that's actually a great thing. So what you said resonated with me around keeping people healthy. But one of the things we do see is the patient at the center of this vast, chaotic, cluttered universe, and left piecing everything together, sort of like in your video. You've got the hospitals, you've got the insurance companies, you've got your doctor, you've got pharmaceutical companies, you got drug companies, you got the government, you have all these different players, and the consumers in the middle going, And we're the big companies, we're siloed inside of our organizations, we're siloed outside of our organizations, and so one thing that I've noticed is the unmet needs in the marketplace that aren't being addressed by any one entity because they fall outside of the typical areas of ownership. But and addressing those, how do we address those? So the theme of WUD this year is collaborating for better systems in healthcare, and that word collaborating really resonates with me because in order to make good stuff happen inside of our organizations, we're going to need to collaborate across teams, from tech to design to lines of business, but then also outside of our organization. I'm sure the only way that the WellMatch thing works is you're probably connecting what used to be disparate databases and putting it all in one place in a consumer-friendly way. So I want to know what kind of collaboration would you like to see? And how do you think that sort of collaboration could be made possible? How do we get it together and partner as organizations in order to make things better for the patient and consumer?
Well, that's exactly right. It is very disparate, and it is a symphony. I like to joke it's a symphony of APIs and services that power WellMatch, and we're constantly working on it. Yeah, it's definitely, for me, I think it's trying to bridge that gap and that language gap between the patient and the doctor. And it's really hard because they are speaking different languages. We're exploring a lot of things like member-friendly taxonomy, but even that idea of member, like somebody's a member, they're not even a person, is just outside of this consumerism concept. So we've really had to take another step back to really understand how people are searching, how people are trying to look up these procedures. It takes a lot of time, and we're really trying to get it right. And I think that's really just trying to understand more about how patients are speaking the language and then how it translates to the doctors.
So, you mentioned the different sort of the various different things that come together and how the consumer the consumer isn't even a person and often isn't getting their needs met. And one thing that again, this sort of, not sure I wanted to get into this early in the panel, but on my personal experience as a patient, unfortunately, have had this situation of an unmet need. And not just that, I mean, there's so much research going out there that even the best doctors don't necessarily know about. And even the smartest, savviest patient might not be able to find out about. So in my mind, the biggest collaboration and one of the biggest challenges, certainly not the only one, but one of the biggest challenges, is how do we make sure that the research, the super cutting edge stuff that's going on with tech and with using tech to help patients. Not just that, obviously there's research beyond tech, but there's a lot of tools now that aren't getting shuttled over to the consumers, again, the patients who are anything less than super savvy. Things like the Fitbit, things like these high technologies, apps to count your calories. That's really great if you're, highly educated, you have a smartphone, and you care enough, not just care, but you have the energy and the wherewithal to deal with that. Then sure, you can do that stuff. But who's gonna help you with that? Who's gonna tell you how to do that? And that's well beyond just the doctors. In my mind, there's a sort of a combination between this, a more holistic view of health that goes beyond just medical doctors, is a very, very challenging thing. And sometimes patients know themselves better than any doctor could. And that's not necessarily something that's getting reflected in any of our systems. And then on the flip side, is the research that's going on in various organizations. So, through my work, I've been exposed to amazing advances with autism, using tracking of vitals for autism patients, using tracking for diabetes patients. And these things get, they get studied in one group, in one university, in one place, one med school, and they have amazing results. And what happens, it could take years for those things to come into play. And what about all the people who need the help now? So in my mind, that's one of the biggest gaps to bridge in collaboration.
I think about collaboration on a couple levels, and I think Amy nailed one at the beginning, talking about psychology and all we know about psychology and applying that to motivation, persuasion, and behavior change. Really, that's what it comes down to. And another way a collaboration, I think, or a collaboration need, I think, is data openness, and maybe that openness isn't quite the right word, but in the exchange of data. And I think maybe you're getting at that a little bit as well. But we wear these things. Okay, granted, most of us don't wear 3 of them. But all these devices that can collect all this data about us, about what we do, and what happens with it. It goes up to a website, and maybe we look at it, maybe we don't. It tells us we slept 6 hours last night. Okay, that's great. What do I do with that? I woke up 4 times as opposed to 2 times. Well, how do I change? What do I do? You've told me what I've done, but you haven't bridged the gap to how do I change it, or why does it matter? So I think those are some of the areas where we need more collaboration.
Yes, I totally want to echo just a comment around the language. Sometimes it's as simple, well, it's not really simple, but just kind of using simple and plain language to communicate. It doesn't have to be an intensive technology or design solution or something really super complex, but you still need that research. You still really need to know how the person thinks and what's their mental model. And that really kind of, I think, spawns that collaboration between the patient or the customer, between their doctor, the insurance company, really towards getting to a better kind of focus and meeting their needs. And I totally kind of echo the focus around the tech and kind of trying to be a little bit more open. I actually have been to like a Health On conference last year, and they talked about funding the society where people just kind of use their devices, and instead of signing up for insurance, they just kind of pay themselves, and the healthier people get more devices, and it was like this crazy outlandish concept out there. But I guess there's that kind of maybe need or thought around like who actually owns this data? Does the company own the data? Do I own the data? Does Fitbit own it? Somebody else? What do I do with it? And then just kind of, again, the point around collaboration, I think probably one of the basic things is sharing. So just how do I share my data among the different doctors, the different hospitals? A lot of that is so broken. It just seems like such a simple thing, like how can you not do it? But, obviously it is a little bit difficult because that data is proprietary, there's security restrictions. I know like the government has been trying to do a lot of that with opening up some of the data, like some of the veterans could download their health data via the Blue Button initiative. But then I think they also have like the Rainbow and all these, who knows, maybe like next year is going to be the Unicorn initiative. So it's very strange, it's very difficult, like there's all these complexities. So it almost seems like you need some sort of like what HTML did for the web needs some sort of open standard like that for health.
Yes. We can talk about HIPAA at the bar. Okay. So, talking about collaboration, you mentioned how patients collaborate with their doctors, how patients collaborate with each other, how patients can learn from researchers, how do we sort of connect all of these dots through collaboration? But when you think about what's happening now, so there are some health apps, so an app on your phone that people are using, diabetics, for example, and these apps are clinically proven to improve outcomes, to improve A1C levels, so that's the measure in diabetes. That's like a drug. So we might get to the point where apps are prescribed to people who have conditions in the future, alongside of drugs, or maybe even in place of drugs. But when you think about behavior change in health, so behavior change, how are we going to help people change their behaviors? How are we going to help this person with anger management, or that person stop speeding on the highway, or this person save better, or this person eat better? I mean, as Americans, we stink at being healthy, and we stink at saving money. So, in our organization, we're focusing a lot on health and finance with behavior change. When you think about behavior change, you don't want anybody telling you how to live. So you don't want your health insurance company saying, hey, you need to lose weight, and we're going to penalize you if you don't, or we're going to you're going to get entered into a sweepstakes, eat a salad, win $1 million. These are very personal conversations where we're telling you, take your meds, lose some weight, exercise more, and it's all good stuff, but it's very intimate, it's very personal. So, I mean, what have you guys seen? Do you think it's possible to motivate people? Because there's one side that says, okay, the person has to be motivated to begin with, and then we'll give them the means by which they can turn that motivation into action via small steps. And then you have other folks that think, oh, you can actually affect motivation if you align it with what people truly value. So I want to have more energy for my kids, or I want to be able to run that marathon, or I want to be able to get into that bathing suit, whatever the case may be. But how do you align these solutions to what people really care about? So I'm curious what you guys have seen. How do you think, do you think we can affect motivation? Do you think we can help people change their behavior? And if so, how? And what have you seen work?
Well, I do. I do think we can. I think it's a lot of small steps and tiny steps to make that happen. One of the things with our app that we did, which we didn't have it in our original requirements deck, but we just started to align with behaviors that people were already doing. So we have the patient reviews, and one of the things we found through our ethnographies was that when people are going through the process of vetting a doctor, they were doing two things that we tried to emulate in the app. One of them is they would go and they would look up on Yelp, they would look up on Google, and they would try to say, hey, what's like the general sentiment about this? And the other thing that they would do is they would talk to their coworkers and their friends. So we tried to put two things in the app that seemed to really resonate, and one of those is having those kind of real patient reviews about patient experience, wait times, the experience you've had with your doctor, as well as if your coworker has recommended that doctor or not. And those things have really resonated really well. We have seen, we are a beta, so we are, slowly, but we're seeing like tremendous gains in engagement, and tremendous over existing Aetna systems, just by making it very simple and somewhat engaging. I mean, it's still just a price, but it is it's simple to get to. So we're seeing more searches performed. We're beating out all of our KPIs. So I think that's promising. I'm not saying that it's solved. I do think that we have the ability to affect change as long as we figure out ways to make it engagement and meet patients where they're at.
So I think it's a really interesting question. I have a problem with the choice of saying affecting motivation, because I think there's very few people in the world who if you ask them, they would say, no, I don't want to be healthier, I don't want to feel better, I don't want to eat healthier, I don't want to exercise more. Everybody wants to. I think a lot of people, anybody who's ever tried to start a regime like that with food or exercise will know that changing your habits is really hard. And some of these apps and some of these gadgets are all geared, and Steve, you mentioned this about changing habits, that these are all geared towards this idea of if we can make a habit change. Because if you need to do something once, it requires willpower, and we now know that willpower is a depletable energy resource. It runs out, and actually it runs out faster if you're on a diet. So it's literally because it's replenished by glucose. So it's literally been shown that it's harder to have willpower when you're trying to diet. So all of these things are actually really, really hard. And so I don't think that there's anyone who needs a motivation per se. I think what they need is frustration management, because people are so used to saying, yeah, I know I should lose weight, but how? Like, I'm just not that kind of person who can do that. And so I think there's been a lot of really interesting developments in the consumer space, actually, about habit change. The Willpower book that by Roy Baumeister, I want to say, and The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg. These are fascinating books, highly recommended, by the way, all about this idea that habit change is so much more lasting, because if you make a change and you manage to build a new habit or switch a habit out, swap your potato chips with carrots, obviously it's easier said than done, but if you can do that, that's lasting. That's something that you can build on, and then within these apps, I actually recently heard there's a product that's coming up to launch soon. It's called Pavlok, and they're actually marketing themselves as the habit changing bracelet. I'll be happy to tell you more about it later.
I need to hear this.
But yeah. So the idea here is that if you, I think even by the way, even Gretchen Rubin, the author of the Happiness Project, she's now working on a book for habit change. So this is it's almost like a pop culture change here, but in a sense, again it goes back to, sure, if you're a savvy consumer, you'll seek this information out. But I think that a lot of the work that should be done, not so much in motivating people to want to change, but giving them the tools to make the change sustainable, and decreasing their frustration and their assumption that, I want to, but it's not going to work, so why even bother? And so you mentioned small steps, and I think that the theme is, one step at a time. I think that one of the biggest, my biggest takeaway from this Power of Habit book was that if you build a keystone habit, if you change one habit, and you see the positive effect of that just one habit, then you say, I can do this. So maybe I can, if I stop smoking, then maybe I can lose weight also. Maybe I can exercise also. Maybe suddenly all these things aren't out of reach. So I think that's my biggest thing that I would say. If you can do that, if you can help people see that it's possible for them to change in a way that's sustainable, that's not like a one-time, that is going to be much more powerful than just motivating them. Because you can motivate people all day long, it still won't help. If they don't feel that they can actually achieve the goals.
I don't know how much I can follow up those two. But yeah, I mean, in terms of behavior change, yes, it's possible. I would just add, we talked about small steps. There's I don't know if it's really a movement, but Tiny Habits, BJ Fogg. That, you know, he had like a little program that he was working on. So, you know, I mean, it's really all in the name. You know, it's you just try to change one tiny thing at a time rather than, you know, go from 0 to 60. And that's really the key. In terms of, you know, other things, you know, there's the whole gamification. You know, so you have an app, or you know, oh, you got so many steps today, you get a badge, or you know, your tree grows. Yes, your tree grows. Yes, or
mind
whatever.
blown, right?
Yeah. Or you know, they flash like a hey, good job. You know, so there's those kinds of things as well. But I mean, I think the key really is the tiny habit. I mean, I think they really nailed it with that movement.
Yeah, so I guess since we're throwing out some books out there, I want to throw out my favorite two, Willpower Instinct by Kerin Smollen. A very great book, kind of summarizing a lot of the science behind willpower and how you can improve it. And I have so some of the folks here in the audience are not, you know, directly related to health or not working in that space, but I feel like even if you are just kind of working around behavior change, because in some way we all are in one way, we want our customers to do you know, take a certain path or do a certain action. So I think if you are interested in that space, check out Choice Architecture by, I forget the name, but Colleen Roller. So she kind of coined that concept around how do you make people almost take a certain action based on the things that you're designing, so shaping the path. Obviously, there's BJ Fogg is a prominent name in that space. And then also Dan Ariely's books and just kind of that broader field of behavioral economics, which deals with a variety of different topics. So definitely check that out. The other thing I just want to kind of add to the discussion, I know we kind of talked a lot about big steps, but I also feel like it's almost like, and maybe this is just an impossible goal, but thinking about the culture as well, just because a lot of the affluent cultures and countries really kind of suffer from symptoms and diseases that are not present in poorer countries, which is, you know, it's diseases caused by lack of, you know, exercise and too much sitting around and things like that. I think a lot of, you just kind of look at the culture, it's sometimes you see like these advertisements, you know, these beautiful, sexy people doing bad things, you know, drinking alcohol, booze, eating fat burgers, you know, that's not healthy. You know, obviously, so how do you kind of maybe change that image? And, you know, on the opposite of that, you know, you see brochures at a clinician's office, people smiling, and it's some brochure for a disease. So there's this disconnect between people and health and kind of really promoting it as a great lifestyle. And I totally agree. It's sometimes it is, you know, maybe people do get to that step of like, I want to change, but sometimes it is how, you know, they're completely clueless, or, you know, they mess up, and then, you know, as we know with willpower, they just kind of slide back and, you know, screw it, I'm just going to eat that whole cake if I eat one slice. So all those kinds of things that you need to be savvy of.
Or the pumpkin rule.
Denying that swirl thing back there. Good. Yeah, it's interesting what you said about actually sitting is the new smoking, as it were. So thought workers that we are, you know, sitting down all day long, it's extremely unhealthy. Even if you're active after work, just sitting, it doesn't release toxins in your body, and it's just all sorts of badness. So we actually did an app called Hot Seat, and it was designed to get you up out of your seat throughout the day and reduce sedentary behavior in the workplace. And the fun part about that is, it goes back to what you guys are saying, we piloted it with the American Heart Association, and it involved social components, so the persuasion aspect. So I could do 10 flights of stairs, pass it to Kerin, and because I know she's in a meeting and she can't do 10 flights of stairs, so then I get points and she loses points, and we can trash talk each other. So it can be competitive, or it could be collaborative, where Kerin and I are working against, Steve and Dan, and so that social component inserted this persuasion, the levity, the fun, so that you're taking small steps, but you're also kind of enjoying time with coworkers. And in the pilot, what happened was it was like a gateway drug. So it was micro-sizing, mini exercises. So I dance in my office, or do flights of stairs, or walk around the building. But only for between 2 and 8 minutes. So 2 and 8 minute exercises. But what happened was people started with the 2 or 8 minute exercises, and then all of a sudden they were like, oh, okay, that I can do that. And then went to the gym membership, and then started with kettlebells, and then it was just forget it. So like a good kind of slippery slope. But along those lines, these apps they're collecting data. How many times did I dance in my office yesterday, and or do I plan to tomorrow? And or they're tracking how many steps I took, how many calories I consumed, and there's this concept around in behavior change. You can help somebody understand their diet and make small changes, and then they might be done with that and ready for the next thing, but you've changed their behavior. But thinking about the quantified self movement, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that, but collecting all this personal data for anything from what music you listen to calories, etc. There's a quantified self movement, and then there's all this big data. What are we going to do with all those big data? How are we going to actually get insights from it? How are we going to actually learn from it? Is it going to help us? So I'm wondering about your perspective on the quantified self movement, and where do you see it going? Does it have legs? Does it help? How can we how can we reflect the data back in a way that's compelling, and persuasive, and maybe even social, and that people can learn from themselves and others? I want to pass it to Steve first.
I was gonna say I'm not answering before Steve on this one.
I think quantified self is very much in its infancy. I think that the technology is actually probably the limiting factor in terms of getting the data that we need to collect. So for example, I'm wearing these different wristbands, Fitbit and Nike, and what they're doing is they're somehow extrapolating my entire movement based on just what's happening on my wrist, and that's may not necessarily be the best way to do that. So. And then you run into, what is the best way to do it, and how do we? You end up with you got sensors all over yourself, and I don't think the average person is going to put up with that. Okay, let me wake up, shower, and put on my 7 different things.
There is a smart toilet, by the way. You can connect it to your Wi-Fi.
There's also
Go ahead.
No.
But go ahead.
Look, I just wanted to mention there's also there's been prototypes of sensor clothing.
Yep.
So
they've got fabric.
Yeah,
They're working on like fabrics that can be the actual sensors, and so I think the quantified self, it's got legs. I think we're going to look at, in 10 years, we're going to look back and say, oh, remember the Stone Age back in 2013 when we just had these things on our wrist and you had to charge them every 3 days? Wow, those losers back then. But I think to your other point, it's one thing to collect data, and it's another thing to actually present it in a way that you can actually do something with it. Right. And that's the key, and I think that's where a lot of the current implementations are falling down. So they say, okay, you took this many steps, or actually sleep is that's my kind of like soapbox I like to get on, because they measure how long you slept. That's great. I slept 8 hours. Okay, so, and then they try to say, oh, you woke up this many times. Like, okay, but what do I do? What can I do to not wake up as many times? Because presumably that's hurting my sleep.
Stop with the espresso before bedtime.
But it doesn't. Yeah, exactly. It could be that simple, and that's where going back to the first question is collaboration. We've got all these people researching, sleep researchers, sleep labs, and it's really not making its way into the apps and into the devices that consumers are using. It's kind of stuck in the in the middle somewhere. I don't know where it is. We have to find it.
You guys want to go?
Yeah, so I guess I could just kind of go off of sleep. I think I owned a WakeMate before they went out of business, and then I think Zio was another one that also went out of business.
Oh,
So,
seriously? I haven't heard. I
something
think
like
they're
that.
still running, but
Maybe they're
maybe
just
not.
struggling, but that's what
Yeah,
I've heard.
I may not be up to date on that.
I guess it's just a very difficult area to kind of penetrate, but I do think Zio had some kind of sleep IQ and it did give you some advice. So they
Yeah.
kind of go
They
a little
give
bit
you
more
like
of a
scores,
step.
yeah, but that's
Right.
like 97% sleep.
Yeah, it's
All right.
still
Right.
it's still a bit hard to figure out what do you do from there. But I think quantified self, I definitely agree it is kind of in its infancy. And the way I kind of see it, I don't necessarily agree that it's all technology because sometimes you can just kind of track by, doing like a log, very kind of paper-based. That said, a lot of, what quantified self is usually associated with is having these cool apps or devices or trackers. Like I have my Fitbit over here, which, I got this thing. I was really excited. I actually bought 2 of these for my parents because I thought, my parents need to get healthy. Then I found out that I was the unhealthy one, which is very embarrassing. But, it is kind of interesting that you kind of see this data come back and you see these steps. But yeah, it's definitely in its infancy. But at the same time, I also see these folks as kind of these first people who try these things out. So it's a good way to kind of approach that group as these early adopters, so to say. And I guess just a personal side note too, I tried to really hard, maybe just suck at promoting, but I did try and start a quantified self meetup here in Connecticut. A total of 1 person showed up. That was like for...
Aside from you.
Yes,
That's good. That's good. That's good.
So, and we had a great intellectual discussion. Actually, it was about like folks with ADD and mental health and using this, not just these devices, but really these powerful CPUs and things that can really kind of change behavior and help things out. Really kind of that very next step, from aside from these devices. So I think that's kind of where things are really should be going. I think quantified self is kind of that first step in there, but there's still a lot of room to improve.
So I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that this philosophical bent on like where could this actually go, and I think the quantified self people, in a sense, they get some bad rap, like, oh, I want to measure everything, like the toilet, like who cares, right? You're measuring every aspect of your life. I think it matters not because of what it is, but what the potential is. And you mentioned big data. There's so much that could be mined from this data. One example that I alluded to is in the autism case, and what things could be done with these technologies when they're taken out of that context and put in a different one. So in this research that comes out of the MIT Media Lab, they took autism patients and they gave them sensors on each hand that were measuring heart rate and temperature and skin arousal, so conductance. And it turned out in one of their pilot studies that these kids, these kids were sitting in a classroom. They look, 1 minute it looks like everything's fine. The next minute, one kid hits another. Okay, and in so many of these cases, like these are things that repeat themselves over and over again. And the teachers like flabbergasted. It was like, what happened? There was nothing here. So, but they did this study where they were videotaping the entire situation, and then they synced the videotape with the sensors. And so in retrospect, they were able to see that there was a spike in the kid who was about to hit the other kid. There was something happened in the social situation, like one kid started making this noise, and then the other kid, his temperature spiked, his arousal spiked. He looks like nothing's happening outwardly, but inside he's like boiling over. And so there was like a 2-minute lag between when the original like trigger happened and when the kid actually hit his, the person who was making the noise. And so if you had access to that in real time, the teacher would be able to intervene before it happened. So that in my mind, that's just incredible. It's mind-blowing. And for families who have, autism as one of their kids, or even grown-ups these days, that would be life-changing. And so that's just one example, but I think that the potential here is huge, and you don't need to go that far. Obviously, you mentioned the big data, right? That was part of the question: is what do we do with this data? But if you had access to all that data, and big data is almost like past its hyped peak in the use of the term, but in a sense, I was recently at a conference for information knowledge management, and one thing that I really liked there was that they said, well, big data isn't about the size of the data. It's actually about the fact that you have all these different sources, each of which is actually quite, is bigger than maybe what we used to have, but it's not that big. But each of them separately is only giving you one piece of the puzzle, and if you're able to put them all together, that's when the real insight happens. So, if you track your food and you track your activity and you track what your sleep, and then you can maybe say, oh, your cup of coffee at 8 p.m. is the thing that's causing, maybe you should try cutting down on that one. And maybe it's not that. Maybe you try it and then you see that nothing changed, so you try something else. You could almost foresee like a hypothesis, like a scientific method of trying to improve your life based on this quantified self. Maybe you'll notice that every Tuesday morning you're not sleeping. You're waking up like crazy because you stayed up late and watched this TV show that's giving you nightmares. Who knows? But you won't be able to know that unless you track it. So I think long story short is it's not so much about what's there now, and that goes back to the idea. I think it's what it could be there, and obviously people are not going to be suiting up unless we find a way to make that interesting enough and worthy of their effort, and not effort. If it takes effort, then they won't do it. If it's effortless and worthy, then they might want to do that.
Yes, I'll be brief. I think everybody had really great answers here. I think for me, when it comes to this, I think there's just personally, just very little. I'd have to be really motivated to want to do this, motivated to a goal outside of that. And I think just the idea of tracking everything, I know this has been said, just for the idea of tracking it for potential insights down the road, you really need to make that reward or motivation very clear. And I think you had summed it up when you were doing your dance, your little, tiny exercise games. You're playing against your friends, you're doing this gamification. There's more to it than just adding that little extra bit of tracking. And so for me, thinking the only time I actually do tracking was when I was trying to be a better athlete, and I was trying to get my heart rate, so it would be, I was tracking it all the time, and then I stopped. So I think having that combination of why I would do it and making sure that that's in alignment with people's expectations, and there's a real reason and motivation to do that would make these things more palatable and help them grow.
So in the health industry, we can become frustrated, maybe a little bit jaded, maybe a little bit restless because you're saying in time we'll look back and laugh. I'm laughing right now. I mean, every day. No, because
at least you're not crying.
At least you're not crying, right? Exactly. Because
the laughter covers the tears.
Because there's so much we can do, right? So we're like, oh, let's give people access to their medical records, and so they can understand, and so that if they show up in this hospital, the information's there, and and what's happened is doctors have turned into data entry specialists, and still you can't get access to your records, or still the doctor over there doesn't have the crucial information that might save your life. But at least we're doing something. It's just not fast enough. And then all these devices, they track your data. They're reflecting it back at you so that you can learn, because the average doctor appointment's only 7 minutes, and so, but I'm with myself all day long, every day of the year. So how can we help people make decisions? I mean, and then to your point, doctors, being human and all, don't have the capacity to read every single journal article and every single topic and connect all the dots that may be present in all these disparate databases. And then the companies in the health industry, just the basics. We're all talking about innovation. I worked on a project recently. It's like, we're going to let people contact the doctor digitally. And they were like, so innovative. It's like, it's not innovative. Like, this should be happening 10 years ago. So, we're always like, okay,
And the
what's
doctor
next?
has time to answer the
Right.
responses,
The reason why it
right?
hasn't
Between the
happened-
7-minute appointment.
Right, it's because the doctors don't get compensated for digital time the way they do for in-person time, but that's changing. So a lot of it is financial, but also technology. So I guess my point in all of this is in the health industry we're all about like innovation, but we kind of stink at the basics. I was telling this to somebody earlier. Getting the basics right would actually be hugely innovative. But I'm wondering from a communication perspective, helping people understand their health, understand themselves, make good decisions, and from a technology perspective, leveraging technology for consumers, leveraging it for doctors, and connecting all the dots. Where do you see things heading? And if you had a magic wand, what would you make to be? I guess is the question. And this is the final question. I want to open it up to the audience. But what, Queen for a day, what are you going to do?
I think for me, the big thing is I would improve the delivery mechanisms by using technology. One of the things that have really been exciting to me, and I think one of the innovations I'm actually pretty excited about, is telemedicine. And I know that Google has done this recent rollout with the Google Help Outs, which are strangely HIPAA compliant, which is one of those things which kind of indicate that they're getting kind of interested in the health field. So I'm a mom, and I have a 2-year-old, and so the first year of her life, I felt like I was on the call with the pediatrician constantly. It's like, she's coughing. No, wait, her nose is running. Wait, no. And you're constantly doing that. And then recently I got a teledoc, and one night she had a cough. I called this, you get the video conference, 10 minutes later, you have your prescription, and it gives you some reassurance. And it's just one of those things where that doctor could be anywhere, anytime. It's almost retro. It's almost like I had a house call. And it just made such a difference in how I felt about that whole thing. So I'm thinking, telemedicine is, just as much as we can, getting delivery to patients, and at their homes,
I love the retro part, the house call. That's exactly what I was thinking. That sounds amazing, by the way. So the magic wand, I actually had an answer in advance, and I'm considering changing it, but we'll see. So my answer in advance was really about this idea that, again, that the research, in so many cases, there are people with chronic situations. Some of them are diseases or syndromes, but there's so many things, there's so many people out there who are actually suffering. Healthcare is about healthy people, but it's also about sick people. And unfortunately, there are people who spend their life managing serious conditions, and they don't get to function like normal human beings. And I have my own situation, which again, thankfully, I no longer have to deal with, which is incredible. But I yesterday opened up my Facebook, and one of my friends is a Crohn's disease sufferer, and not a day goes by where like the top of my feed is her latest update on how life is such a struggle every single day, and whether she should get hospitalized or not, and so on. And it's just it's mind-boggling, because in my mind these issues are taken separately, and so it goes back to my opinion that medicine is not, there's your body and there's your mind, and they're not separate things, and when you're suffering physically, then other things go wrong, and it's very, very hard to deal with. And sometimes doctors don't get it. Sometimes they get it, but they can't help. And so the magic wand is dual. So if it could really do anything, it would be obviously solve all these people's problems. But in more realistic terms, at the very least, there are many cases, unfortunately, where the information to help these people is out there and it's not getting to them. So that would be my fix. Is make sure that whenever the medical establishment, someone knows the answer, that should be getting to these people. And so that's been one of my personal frustrations, and what I would most would most harp on if given the magic wand that could do anything within slightly more realistic terms.
Can I have more than one magic wand, or is it just one per?
I'll take back my second one after.
I think you stole part of my answer because we're going to have two magic wands dealing with data and getting information in the right places. My focus is on the devices. That's where I come from. That's my work. So, but again, we give the device or the data from that device to the person, and it never goes beyond that. It never gets its way into it. That's starting to change. I know, like, some insurance companies are now starting to, you can take the data and pull it in and I'm still learning about that myself, actually, how all that happens. So I know the changes are happening. Again, it's slow, it's glacial, but that's the health system right now. So so in one level, that's what I would change, and then the other magic wand, I would just say, let's just all start over again. Because some of the things I think that are stopping us are the current systems we have in place, and it's sometimes it's easier to blow it up and start over again.
Yes, I guess I have now a really boring answer because I was definitely going along that same route. It's just data, but if you had a magic wand, you can change anything. That's kind of the topic here. Change the behavior all in one fell swoop. Just change it all, so the person doesn't have to deal with all these emotions and all these difficult things and knowledge. But obviously, that's a little bit impossible. I definitely see tech being kind of this delivery mechanism, some sort of open standard, something that would allow people to get this data from all these different sources and design almost as an enabler. So actually delivering data that's meaningful, that's easy to understand, not just this raw set of data, but actually information that a person could use. So I think that's kind of really the key message here, is just getting that information connected and ultimately in some sort of form that's easy to understand and act upon.
I am going to steal it back for the second half, if that's okay. Yeah. So you mentioned something really interesting in your question about sort of the minimal time that doctors have with patients, but also the sort of the procedures that they go through. And so we were on the theme of books. There's anybody anyhow connected to the healthcare industry should go out, run, don't walk, and read the Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. And he's a surgeon at, I believe, Brigham Women in Boston. And he basically implemented a 7 or 8 item checklist for operating rooms that single-handedly reduced infection by 30% everywhere that it was implemented. And this was a piece of paper with 7 items listed on it. That's it. So it's insane, but it's super, super effective. And all it does is really, it follows the model of pilots on airplanes and what they do to make sure, that everything's in place. It follows that model. It has to be short. It has to be simple. But it's if just followed only by asking the questions, like, did we do this? Did we do that? You are able to do these amazing things. And this was, I think, line infections. I'm no expert, but something like 30% reduction in line infections in all operating rooms. And this is everywhere from like Africa to Canada. So it's not just where you have the means, but it's everywhere. So I think in terms of, I sort of said get the information to people, but really it's information in the wider sense of the word. It's not just the items that you need to know, but actually the procedure to follow through on them. So that would be the sort of the other half of that, and so again it goes back to this idea of if we only knew everything and did everything that we know we should, then we would be a lot better. And then, of course, I can't argue with let's change the healthcare system, because I come from Israel where you have socialized medicine. So don't get me started on that soapbox altogether.
I love it. So get the right message to the right person at the right time, and give them the tools to to act upon that information. That's beautiful. Actually, starting from scratch. So if you had a magic wand, you'd make a bomb. So that's interesting.
I didn't say that. Putting words in my mouth.
We're being recorded, right?
But great. But we've actually done workshops with some organizations where so much baggage and residue and everything else. So it's like, okay, pretend you don't work here. You're starting a new company and you can do anything, and that helps people like let go of their stuff. But
The innovators don't
the reason why it can be a bit frustrating hitting obstacles is because we believe in the vision. I mean, as designers, as people in the usability profession, empathy is part of the job, and you can't help but feel empathy for people and realize that we can affect people's lives and even save lives leveraging technology and design and psychology. So that's what gets me up out of bed in the morning, is like, oh my God, I can go to work and what we do can actually help people in really real ways. So that's what keeps us going. But so I wanted to put it out to you guys. Do you guys have any questions? Did any of this make sense? Yeah? Okay, good. Anybody got any questions?
Can you give the speaker the mic so we all can hear the question?
Oh, yeah, sure. I will MC this.
One of the things I struggle with when I'm trying to get healthier is, I'll go through this whole process of downloading an app that's supposed to remind me to walk or help me track my food, but after a while that novelty wears off and the fun and the whole gamification aspect sort of loses its appeal to me. Any thoughts on that? Very generally, have you heard of anything, or is anything in the works to try to correct that problem? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Did the habit stick?
It depends on how long it took for the novelty to wear off. So sometimes, but sometimes not.
Yeah, I mean, that's the trick with, we look at engagement. Like, we don't want people to uninstall our app, but if our app helped them get to the next level, and then maybe they're ready for another app, that might be a good thing. But do you guys have any thoughts on that?
So it's actually really interesting that you mentioned that at some point maybe the user doesn't need the app anymore. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but in my case, I was using MyFitnessPal to lose weight, and I used it to track all my meals. I hate counting calories with a passion, and that's why when I saw that they have barcode scanning, I was like, I could do this. And so, I barcode scanned everything in my house, and I had the recipes and everything, and I used it. It was amazing. And after 3 months, I didn't need it anymore because I knew what I was eating, and I knew what it meant to do, to do 1,200 versus 1,500 versus 1,800 calories a day. And the habit stuck, and I kept getting the benefits long after I stopped using the app. But I agree with you that the novelty of the gamification wears away, and that was actually one of the big things getting me to stop using that app, because I might have continued. I had 2 other friends who were doing it with me, and they dialed off, and then I dialed off, and then there wasn't really much point in it because I also didn't feel like I needed it anymore. And similarly with the Fitbit, they have the social network thing where, your friends, you're competitive with them or you're not, or maybe you encourage them, you cheer them on or not. But yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest risks of gamification within the social network context is that it only works if your social network's still engaged. And once they stop getting engaged, then your engagement actually would probably be lower than it would have been if there was no social network in the first place, because then you weren't using this extrinsic motivation to get you going. I think that's definitely a risk, and anybody who's designing those gamification apps should be very, very careful with. And with the Fitbit also, I noticed that, like you mentioned, I don't know, which app were you? Sorry, what was that? Yeah. Oh God, 10,000 steps is not my goal. It hasn't been for a long time. My goal is 8,500, and I'm very, very happy when I do that. 10,000 is really hard. But I agree with you, and the Fitbit, I think one of the nice things is they'll give you the badges every time you get there, but they also have this, at some point, like, okay, I once got the 30,000 step badge. I was like, I had a leg cramp after that. But then, you know, I don't think I'm ever going to get it again. So, you know, that's now my best badge and I can't beat it anymore. So I definitely agree with you that that's a risk. It's definitely an interesting question on how to deal with that. And I don't think there's an easy answer. I think that in general, it's been shown that if your motivation is extrinsic and then you take it away, then you're actually less motivated than you would have been before. So it is definitely a risk, and I think that it's one that designers should do well to be careful with. I don't know if you want to...
Yeah, one thing we found too is diversity of pathways. So the pathway that works for me might not be the pathway that works for you. And even if it works for me for this week, I might be ready for a different pathway next week. So to have diversity of pathways, and then to all this quantified self stuff, you know, to what end? Like, why am I walking? Am I walking because I'm preparing for a 5K? Am I walking because I want to burn so many calories? Am I walking because I want to burn so many pounds? So then it becomes something that, you know, you're working toward your goal. It might be your ongoing goal. So it's sort of something that resonates with you in a way that's meaningful. Any other questions? I'll go to the front first.
Hi. I know you talked about personalities and psychology and stuff like that. Have we ever, or someone has thought about, like, almost having, you know, like in harmony, match you up with the right doctor? Because some doctors will just tell you straightforward, and some people might not.
Yeah.
Other doctors are a little bit more patient with you.
Yeah.
Kind of having that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
That's for you. That one's
Yeah.
for you.
We hear that all the time. We've been trying to come up with ways to almost build like tweets about doctors, like little tiny things that you could do, searchable IDs. We're experimenting with it because we hear that a lot. Like, I want somebody who really spends a lot of time with me, and then I'll go to do some usability testing in New York, and I'm like, nope, I want them to get in, get out, and get their business done. So we absolutely, that's definitely, we're trying to do like searchable tags and things like that to find that right provider for you, or even the right facility. You know, people definitely, we have the attributes right now for like obviously gender, language, things like that, affiliations, but taking it to the next level is definitely something we hear a lot, and trying to get that right is going to be an interesting challenge.
And you guys actually work at the same company, so you do.
And we should talk about that. Yeah.
I have a strange question maybe. I'd like to get all your business cards because everything you said is I've been thinking about. I'm working on developing a concept to help enhance the quality of life, stabilize the economy. And every single thing you said I have a comment about. So I'm not going to go, of course. But the main thing that I've been struggling with, and you said, is that you can give somebody all the information that they can get, but if they don't take action, it's worthless. Thank you.
Do you have a question? Yes. Okay, so we'll pile on the questions and that'll be it.
Yeah, this is really fascinating, and it sounds like a lot of what you've been talking about is like individual personal empowerment and the allure of being able to find out things through big data or through Googling. I mean, I do it all the time. Sometimes I think I've diagnosed something and then I just go to the doctor to get the formality of the prescription or something. I already know my daughter has an ear infection or whatever because I've Googled it. And maybe there's a false sense of individual empowerment, or maybe it's real. My question is, how much do you foresee actual individual empowerment shifting from doctors, the medical industry, pharmaceutical, insurance companies? I mean, I think you could say that you're either reasonably healthy or you're sick, and if you're reasonably healthy, you can use your Fitbit, and then if you're sick, then I'm going to want my blood drawn and have a doctor look at my health and examine the data. rather than some technology. So how much do you foresee an actual shift in how much individual empowerment people have?
Gotcha. And part of that is giving people the tools before the visit, during the visit, and after the visit, so they can digest and understand what the diagnosis is or what their steps can be. But I'm going to give this to you first, and then you guys can.
Okay. I'm not actually sure how to answer it.
I have a, yeah, you want to
Do that
start?
one? Okay.
So yeah, I totally agree. There's definitely that trend of consumerization, right? People getting more involved with their health. You see that obviously with devices that we kind of mentioned a lot of times, but also just like the things like the 23andMe, some DNA, and all those kinds of things. I guess I'm just kind of cautious about that whole area because I still feel like you need that kind of expertise to really make that final decision. A doctor to really kind of tell the case. What it truly is, but at the same time, doctors also make mistakes, so you kind of have to, sometimes get different, varying opinions. I definitely love Google, but sometimes you just search around a little bit, and at the end, it seems like you're gonna die, like right now. I'm serious. It's like, how do you? I was searching for a condition once. I was just freaked out. I called my doctor. They gave me an ultrasound. Everything went well, but at the end of the day, it's just. Again, you still need that kind of expertise. So I think it's just going to come from more like laws and reform. For example, like if you're seeing a psychologist, sometimes you have to be right there with them. But certain psychologists can't really practice outside of states. So how do you kind of transform that landscape and people either doing something more with phones or video or Skype? So making that kind of access to data and expertise easier and removing some of those traditional barriers.
I do want to add one thing. Yeah, I think that the internet and having, the ability for people to have an interest to ask the questions of the provider that might make sense and having some empowerment to get into that situation is a very good thing. And it's a very good thing overall for society. Yes, people are getting it wrong. Yes, doctors get it wrong sometimes. But the more information that you have about a condition or a procedure or whatever it is, the more empowered you do feel, and the more you can, also engage. One of the things that I really love is that patients like me, and you can engage with communities of people like you. So those are pretty exciting things, I think. Again, having that final word is always great, but knowing what questions to ask, knowing what type of things might happen, and having that knowledge before you head to the provider's office is a great thing. And that's something that we hadn't even had the luxury of until the internet. So that's a really good thing.
Yeah. I'll add to what you said. I definitely agree. We should be careful about over empowering people. I think that there's a reason why doctors have an MD after their name. And let's not, I spent the summer at Google in New York, and I have the utmost respect for the company, but Google's not a doctor. And, there's a really funny quote from 3 Men in a Boat, this book written in Victorian England, where the guy just basically reads through the entire disease book, and he says, "Oh, I have that too." And then by the end of the book, he basically realizes he's going to die in 12 hours, and he might as well just get it over with. So, and of course he barely has a cold. So I agree with you that there's a lot of risk, and part of my current work is actually, making sure people don't, It's very easy to abuse the search engine without even ever intending to. Some people will actually maliciously try to co-opt the search results, but some people just, it's just so easy to self-diagnose yourself with a bazillion different things, and really a doctor will be like, "No, you're fine, it's okay." But you mentioned something very interesting, which is that the Fitbit and all that stuff is great when you're healthy, and what about when you're sick? And so I do want to answer to that. And I've had both situations where, all the online searching in the world is not going to help you, and all these apps and gadgets aren't going to really do much for you when you're really suffering. But at the same time, I've also had the flip situation where the doctors also can't do anything for you. Then when a doctor, an expert in the field, says to you, there's nothing more I can offer you, that's when you get really desperate. And so it's definitely something that is challenging, and if there was an easy answer, we'd already be doing it. I think that you made a really good point about connecting patients who have the same problem, because, you know, at this point in my life, I know about a treatment for my specific disease that most people who have it aren't even aware that it exists, and it's been given to me by an actual medical doctor. And aside from, you know, blogging about it once or twice and spreading the word to anybody who I know has this disease, there's really not much I can do about it. And I even, you know, going back to the doctor who told me there's nothing more I can do for you other than send you to this other expert, I can go back and tell him I did. I told him what was there, and, you know, and he didn't understand. So what do you do then? I mean, it's really, really hard. And I think that somebody was nodding in the audience when I said, you know, the patient sometimes will know themselves better than anybody. And again, with a grain of salt, because if you're not a doctor, then there's only so much you can do. But also the doctor only has 7 minutes for you, and there's only so much they can do. And so I think it should be not about self-empowerment in isolation, but about empowering you with respect to the doctor that you're working with, and with respect to other doctors around them and other research that they might not have heard about. And so that would be my answer. It's not about you being your own practitioner, but it's about you taking responsibility and having the power to affect the path in which your care goes. And I think that is my answer for the people who have real problems that aren't beyond, I need to lose weight, or I need to exercise more. That would be what I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, ideally the technology would make the human time better, more targeted, more timely, more effective. And I think we're getting there, especially by having events like this worldwide, discovering around the topic of health and design, usability and technology. I do think human-centered design can help. So thank you guys for listening to us and talking with us. And I guess the conversation is going to continue at the